welcome to Next Gen PA. My name is Samuel Pimentel, and I'll be joined with
Michelle Angert,
as well as Cole Goodman, the Vice Chair of the Dauphin County Democrats, to discuss the issues that are affecting how young people vote, which way they'll vote, what issues they care about, and overall, how this is going to affect the 2024 election. Issues such as abortion, war funding, and immigration will be the main topics of today's conversation. And now, let's get that conversation started.
Well, first, I want to thank you guys for having me on. Thank you so much. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Well, I'm just curious, as the vice chair of the Dauphin County Democrats, what have you been seeing from young people? Like, what's your perspective on what they care about?
Well, I think overall we have a problem with young people being very apathetic when it comes towards voting and being civically engaged. And I don't think that is a solely Democrat or solely Republican issue. I think that's all around an issue. I hear almost every day, I don't vote. Why should I vote? Why should I care about voting? And because my communities, decade after decade and generation after generation, never change, why should I keep going to the ballot box and voting for people who don't deliver on the promises they run on? And that is a major issue. Being, as you said, vice chair of the Democratic Party, I'll zero in on our party. I can't speak for our colleagues on the other side. Any Democrat that tells you that we don't have an enthusiasm problem is lying, is absolutely lying to you. I believe that some of the topics we're going to talk about could have been and could help us Democrats retain seats, gain seats, and also possibly win the presidency. Where we were going off a solely candidate-specific vibe, we would definitely be in trouble. And President Biden has, in my opinion, legislatively accomplished great things in his first term as president. But we have a messaging problem as Democrats. We don't message well. We don't tout our accomplishments very well. And that's definitely going to be a problem for us.
I can see where that comes from. And as you mentioned, candidate-wise, before we get into the big topics, do you think there is an issue? And I guess this would be both sides for having Biden, who's 80, and Trump, who's I think in his late 70s. Do you think there's a problem with voters just feeling, young voters feeling, I have nobody who kind of represents my group? I mean, what would these two old guys know about the experience of young people? And do you think maybe that's part of the issue for the lack of enthusiasm?
Yes. I think this is just such a sucky position to be in. I like really just for voters who yearn for people who can connect more with them and their experiences and what as young people we do experience. This is a very sucky time, because also a truth is that if we do not rally and get behind Joe Biden, we have quite the possibility of losing the Democratic Republic that we know. I'm not going to say know and love, but that we know, and we can at least live in and strive for a more perfect union. Because President Biden decided to run again, he's what we got. That's just a reality. However, President Biden putting on aviators and getting on a bike isn't going to connect with young people. That's just a fact. I actually, which is crazy, I can't believe I'm saying this, see RFK Jr. resonating more with young people than our own Democratic Party, who is delivering on things like infrastructure bills, who is delivering on legislation to protect a woman's right to choose. We are the party of the people, but sometimes with young folks, it is disconnected, and I completely understand why.
Do you have any insights into why the Democratic Party is, I don't want to say out of touch, but having that difficulty crossing that divide and reaching out to the young people? Because as a young person, lots of the things that the Party stands for are things that I also stand for. But when you don't see them out there shouting from the rooftops that, they're passing these bills, wanting to get these things done, it seems strange that they aren't able to really showcase themselves in a good way. Do you know why they're
Mm,
struggling to do this?
yes. So I think great question. Until our age group realizes the electoral power that we could potentially have. And I would say the only time that has been fully seen in this country, I won't say in this country, but while we've been living, is twice. First with Barack Obama in 2008, and second with Bernie Sanders in 2016. Even though he lost, there was definitely a raw excitement there. To be quite candid with you, when we as a generational block don't get out and vote in droves, we are not the highest priority for leadership in the Democratic Party to cater to. That's just a fact. So if seniors are outvoting us 4-1, then when election time comes around, or even in someone's term, who are they going to cater to because of the next election? It's seniors. It's I would say even age group 45 to 60 as well. So we are and I don't mean we as us three. I mean we as a generation are actively handicapping ourselves to have a proactive voice that is listened to more because of our low numbers in voting. But when we have close elections like we're going to have this time, now you're seeing the aviators come back on. Now you're seeing the promises of debt forgiveness. Now you're seeing the talks of, oh, yes, we are actively in the process of changing marijuana from a Schedule 1 narcotic. But we're in a cycle where and this isn't just Democrats, they're Republicans too.
Mm.
When they need us, we'll get lip service. But then when they win, where are the specific legislative promises that you have said to young people, I will do this to make your life better and such. And then we can talk about what those promises are and such. Again, I'm not saying this is just Biden. This has been going on for decades in this country. And I actually think Biden, out of all of our presidents legislatively, has been the most proactive.
I liked your point about bringing up that it's not just the Democrats, because I was going to say I feel like the Republican Party has the same issue as well, where they sort of only talk to young people when they think that they need them to win elections, and I think that's a real problem with the political establishment in this country, is just sort of pandering to the voting bloc that always shows up when
Mhm.
there's a whole other half of the country out there that you need to galvanize to get out to the polls, or you're not gonna win, you're not gonna, for either party, you're not gonna
Yeah.
be successful. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm going to be honest, I think that they are actually better than us at going where young people are or are listening to. And I'll give examples. To see Vivek Ramaswamy go on Jake Paul's podcast, at first I was like, what the F? Like, that is like, God, that is just such a pander. I mean, but then I coach soccer at John Harris. So I'm around like at least 18-year-olds who are just getting registered to vote. So I kind of sometimes hear what they're talking about. The first time I ever heard politics mentioned on the field at John Harris was, did you see that Vivek guy go on Jake Paul last night? Whoa. And that's when I knew that at least currently they are going where people are listening of this generation. If I see another politician on the View one more time, I'm going to lose my mind. You got to get creative. RFK Jr. is actually good at this as well. And I think that's something that we're lacking, but could get better at, honestly.
Mhm.
I agree with what you said. I mean, I think, at least from a lot of young people I know, you did start to see at least some genuine excitement around on the Republican side around Vivek. And I think, I mean, if you had more Democrats doing that, maybe you'd see the excitement around them. And I think that's kind of goes into our presidential election. I mean, RFK Jr. His whole campaign basically started from the Joe Rogan podcast. And one person or not, whether you want to hear it, younger people are getting their news now more from podcast format and
Yep.
YouTube and things like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
And I think that if you, Republican or Democrat, want to reach that younger audience, you got to go where they are. I mean,
Yep.
like you mentioned, The View. What young person is watching The View?
No.
I've never seen it.
Yeah. Well, I have to admit I have jumped on a few episodes, but it's not a regular like. I mean, no one in my circles and probably your circles as well is like, hey, you see what was on The View the other night? Nah, that's not it. That's not it. But you're absolutely right. His campaign did start off on the Joe Rogan podcast. I forgot that. Yeah, it's sad to say, but I think they're outsmarting us in quite a few ways. And you said before the show that you wanted to like centralize it to Pennsylvania. I actually think the Pennsylvanian Republicans are are having the opposite issue in the sense of y'all are picking candidates that are Trump endorsed and blessed, which is another issue in itself. But that will never win a general election. And I think the Pennsylvania PA GOP is having the opposite problem where they're not picking candidates that can connect with Pennsylvanians. And I just wanted to make that point to zero it in on the Commonwealth from candidates like Doug Mastriano to running right now, Dave McCormick, who again, another candidate not even from here. Mehmet Oz, they thought it was gonna work, that he was Dr. Guru and had the name recognition, and look what happened. So, and it was close, I won't deny, but they thought they had it in the bag. So I actually think the national Republicans have a little more headway than the PA GOP right now.
And I agree with that. A lot of my friends are registered or going to register Republican, and they do know names like Ramaswamy, Trump, DeSantis, and they do support some of those people. However, when it came to state, they didn't really talk about Mastriano. I don't even think I heard Mastriano brought up. And Oz was kind of more of a joke candidate. But there was some, weirdly, among Republicans who would support a DeSantis, there was some enthusiasm around Fetterman, enthusiasm around Shapiro. And I think part of that does come down to their campaigning strategy. One of the huge things about Shapiro was his campaign did reach where young people were. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember, but there was a huge kind of move on TikTok for his campaign. And that was one of the things he was praised for. So I do think it's not even a partisan thing, really. It's more reach them where they are. If you're the Democratic Party and you want to reach them, go on TikTok, go on the Joe Rogan experience, go on things like this. And I think you could find that people will connect with you. And the problem is that no matter your political belief, if somebody tells it to you enough, I think you might be able to learn from that side. And I think that's what's missing right now is that people are talking on Fox News, right? Things your dad listened to. So I kind of agree with where you're coming from with PAGOP being different than national.
Yeah, no, I agree with that analysis for sure. For sure.
I was just gonna say it's interesting that the PA GOP has sort of embraced the Trumpian MAGA candidates is what they think is like the winning formula for Pennsylvania. And I think that's really interesting that they see it that way. Because I mean, Pennsylvania is a really interesting state when you get into the political divides of it. You know, we always talk about like the middle T and like, you know, you have the Democrat bit on the side and the side. But I think, you know, Pennsylvania is so purple that if you want to win the state, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you can't be too on either side of the spectrum. You're just never going to win. So it seems sort of crazy to me that they would go so hardcore for candidates that deep down they must know aren't going to resonate with, you know, the majority of people in Pennsylvania.
Well, I think they're in a catch-22. I think that they're if I am a moderate PA Republican, let's like Pat Toomey. I mean, we saw this in his tenure. If they put up someone not Trump endorsed, that person will lose in the general election. That is just like a fact, in my opinion. When they put someone up Trump endorsed, they're losing. So if I was in their shoes, I don't know the answer to that. I really don't. Because either way, you're struggling. I'll give another Pennsylvania example. I think a Pennsylvania Republican that has, it's been fascinating to watch him toe the line of moderacy and not be Trump controlled, but still win a statewide election is actually Tim DeFore, our Auditor General, because Trump was very on him about having election audits and such. And as you see, that did not happen. So my only guess is he is not Trump's favorite person, but was still able to win by running that kind of line of moderacy. And I think if Republicans put up candidates like that, we'd be in trouble. As Dems, we'd be in trouble. But you keep picking the Mastrianos and Oz's and McCormick's of the world, we love that. Bring them on.
Well, speaking of McCormick, we should probably go into our first topic. Abortion seems to be a really big point for voters this time around. There was just the special election in Alabama where a Democrat sort of blew the Republican out of the water. Seems like the GOP sort of putting all their support behind abortion restrictions doesn't seem to really be working out for them as well as they'd hoped. But we have candidates for the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania that seem to be trying to go down the same route.
Well, I think if you want to reach the more religious audience, then going maybe anti-abortion is the way to go. However, with UC, even with religious audiences, there's sort of a disconnect between the abortion narrative. Sure, many of them will never get an abortion or don't personally support it, but I think there's a difference between people's personal beliefs and legislative beliefs. And you're seeing a lot of campaigning based on pro abortion. There's this sort of congressional debate for PA 10, which is the district representing Harrisburg and York cities. And one of their biggest platforms was abortion. So many people feel that this is what's going to decide our elections. And you do see, with apparently, according to YouGov, 41% of people ages 18 to 29 are pro choice. So I definitely think there might be, if you get the younger audience out, you're going to see that number change maybe for a anti-abortion Republican move to pro-choice Democrat. And I don't think you're going to see anytime soon pro-choice Republican.
Pro-choice Republican. The only time I've seen that is on The West Wing, the last season, if anyone's seen that show. Their character named Arnie Vinnick was senator from California, and he was a pro-choice Republican. And man, if a pro-choice Republican ever made it to a general, that would be very hard to beat. Michelle, you mentioned the Supreme Court. I understand that judges are not politicians. I work in a courthouse. I understand by trade they're not politicians, so they don't operate in the way maybe a normal senator or president or congressional person maybe would. But I don't think it was like that far-fetched to like know that overturning Roe was the dumbest decision politically that they could have ever done. Some people will say given us, but because of how catastrophic it is, I'll just leave it at that they decided to do, because I personally believe that every Democrat should run on women's rights and for reproductive rights. Because in my opinion, your white middle-aged suburban mom knows someone that had an abortion or maybe had one herself. And it was the most difficult decision that she had to make, but she felt because it was her body that she had to make it. So you are now hitting a vein that goes across parties, Democrat, independent Republican of people who have had to either hold a loved one's hand while they went through this experience, or they have had to go through this themselves. And that is a very powerful thing. President Biden was right when he said, at the State of the Union, Supreme Court, you guys don't know what you've done. Like you have made sure that people are going to be getting out and voting for people who want to advocate to codify Roe. I know that for a fact. So I actually think that that is the not the one issue, but the issue that we are on the side that not just is right, but will propel candidates to win in this election year.
What I think is interesting is with the decision of Roe versus Wade, the overturning Dobbs decision, is that now it's been ruled as a state's issue with supposedly no national input. And as we talked about earlier with messaging, now I think the Republicans have themselves in a bit of a messaging mess, as initially it was them who said it should be a state's issue. Problem is now that many states have gone more blue than they hoped, now they're trying to take it to a national ban. And in a way, I feel like that confuses voters. Do you want it to be a national issue? Do you want it to be a state's issue? So, sure, I think this is one of the Democratic Party's biggest strong points is they have been consistent. They haven't said we want pro-choice by state, we want pro-choice nationally. And I think the Dobbs decision was a huge mistake by the Republican Party. So now you just put yourself in a lose-lose situation where you have to either try to win the states, which, as we've seen, is pretty hard to do a pro-life win, or you got to nationally ban it, which is against what the Dobbs decision said. So I think it's lose-lose for Republicans right now on this.
Well, to bring this back to Pennsylvania, I mean, we just had a Supreme Court seat up for grabs in the past election where the two candidates were diametrically opposed on abortion. The Democratic candidate, Dan McCaffrey, was pro-choice, whereas the Republican candidate, Carluccio, was strongly pro-life.
I found a Franklin and Marshall poll that was conducted in August that said that 38% of Pennsylvania voters said abortion should be legal in all circumstances, and an additional 48% said it should be legal in certain cases. So only 13 said it should be illegal like all the time, which, if you're a Republican and you see that, in Pennsylvania, I mean, that statistic is just sort of like, a nail in your coffin on the pro-life movement in Pennsylvania. So I don't know. It just seems very interesting that we know that from other states how elections have gone on this issue, that you would sort of be campaigning on similar things, thinking that you're still gonna win.
Yeah, and let's thank our lucky star, Dan McCaffrey. McCaffrey did win, because if he didn't, that would have been really detrimental to the balance of the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania for sure. And his election, I'm actually glad you brought that up. His election, for me, I was watching that closely because that was for me, a pre-tell of how this year is going to go. If he would have lost, I would have been still concerned, but even more concerned. But it was a good show to not only have Dan McCaffrey win, but also we picked up 2 seats on the Commonwealth Court and one on the Superior Court as well. So it was a Dem sweep, and so to see people getting out and us winning in odd year elections with the courts really made me feel a little bit better towards this I'm sorry, not this year.
I do want to ask you both a question as I'm a bit younger. And 2023 was a very odd year for elections, as I don't think I've ever seen so much enthusiasm around judges and judicial positions. I think because now abortion's a ballot issue. Before, when it was nationally imposed that you could get an abortion, there was no reason to vote for it. So I just want both your perspectives. Has that changed people's attitudes on judicial tickets now?
I think there's still you'll always have your super voter that's going to get out every year no matter what it is to vote. Now, I think it completely changed the mindset of your 50-50 voter. That is and I know some of them personally, that on election day are just of odd year elections. that are just like, it's either going to vote or going to Giant. Which one is it? But now, because of Dobbs and different decisions made by either Republican appointed Supreme Court justices or the Republican Party, I think that's changed quite a bit of voters' mindsets of when it's election day, we got to get out. I think when Roe was overturned, I think that was the first time a lot of white people in this country felt that their rights and their choice was taken away. And that is huge as well. I'm not saying all white people. I'm saying maybe our Caucasian brothers and sisters that were very comfortable in their not just lives, but their aura of, oh, I have all the choices in the world. I know those people as well. When Roe was overturned, it was a whole like, whoa, I can't do this anymore. Something that's been in place my whole life. Like, so I think there's a lot of people everywhere in the country, but especially many people who are Caucasian, where I think that was the first time they felt that something was ripped away from them.
And also, I think it was very interesting. I work the polls here in my local election district, and I live in a very red voter district in South Central Pennsylvania. And for the first time, there was sort of like a tailgate outside our local election polling office for Republicans, and they were handing out who to vote for cards. So, like, literally lining out, if you are a Republican in our district, these are who you should vote for each specific line on the ticket. And that's never been a thing before. I've never seen that before. And it sort of gets you thinking that if they think that they need to spell it out for people in a really red district, like there is no way my district is ever going to go Democrat. Like it's not feasible. It's not happening. But they think that they need to stand there in front of the doors as you're walking in and hand you a piece of paper of who to vote for in this off-year election, that they must be thinking about something, somewhere in their election office, someone was saying, okay, there have been some rumblings about candidates, things that might happen in this election. We need to be proactive and get people to vote for the people that we want them to vote for. And I just thought it was very, I don't know, all these elections they're changing the way they've been in the past. I've never seen that before. It's sort of, I don't know, I didn't like it. I think you should come in with who you're going to vote for beforehand. You shouldn't be given a piece of paper and I would hope it's not going to change your mind as you're walking in the door. But I mean, it probably does for some people. But, it just got me thinking that they must have been worried about something to do that.
That's an interesting little point you said there, because like even in Dauphin County, for example, in the city of Harrisburg, standing at the polls, you could change someone's mind walking in. I've done it. I've been a candidate for city council where like someone was coming in not voting for me, but because I was standing there at the polls, like when they went in, they were like, all right, you'll get one of my votes. Anywhere else in Dauphin County, no one's interested. Like it's a complete waste. Like people, as you know who they're voting for coming in. So that was just a very interesting point you made.
I do think it was weird though, as Cole mentioned, as a candidate or as a sort of working for candidate. I think that makes sense, right? Tell people vote for me. I do find it odd though for a party to tell you who to vote for. I mean, I'm sure, imagine in Dauphin County if just say, here's the Democrats you vote for. And or in more maybe Republican, here's the Republicans you vote for. I feel like that's very odd. And why would you feel a need to do that in a safe red district? Are there certain Republicans who might oppose the party's position? I don't know. I just think that's a very odd decision on their part.
Yeah, it was very strange. Yeah, we'll have to see with the election coming up if they do a similar thing, handing out the flyers. Yeah, we even had to call up our little election district office and be like, are they allowed to do this? Like, can they hand out papers, literally lining out who people should vote for? Like, is this legal? It is, just so you know. But yeah, it's a very different way elections are run. Yeah.
I do, I guess, now want to kind of go into our next point about abortion is pretty partisan, I'd argue, at this point. However, one thing that's been very nonpartisan, and you've seen people who have gone against maybe the leader of their party's position is war funding. And war funding is an interesting one, as we have two big countries right now, two major conflicts that people are aware of and passionate about, which is the conflict between Ukraine and Russia and Israel and Hamas. And you see very conflicting opinions on this. And I want to get both of your opinions on what you think you've seen and how you think certain people feel about it, and if there is any partisan bias to, say, funding Ukraine or funding Israel.
As a country, as a society, Americans like sound bites and like things from what I've witnessed to be very brought down to a simplistic level. Not saying that in the United States, no one's not saying, well, there's stupid people everywhere, but like, not saying that as a society, we're stupid. But, and I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. It's a contrast I see with why a lot of Americans don't like watching soccer, because there isn't a goal every 30 seconds, It's not basketball where there's scoring repetitive. It's like sound bites, and that's how a lot of people like their news now as well, in sound bites and quick clips that they can just hear and form an opinion off a quick clip. The issue, as you both know, with foreign policy is that it is so intricate. It is so historical. It's so it's so steeped in generational warfares between different tribes in some areas, different ethnicities, uh, jihads, holy wars, that on a whole in society, I don't think we truly understand what's going on over there. Now, we on this call do, because we take the extra time to read and educate ourselves, speak to people from different sides, talk to people from said countries. But I hate when foreign policy is brought up in these, for example, presidential debates. They want 30-second quips for generational issues. So we have a huge problem over here, in my opinion, discussing foreign policy to start. I absolutely do believe that the Israel-Hamas conflict is being politicized. It's being partisanized. I don't even know if that's a word. But in my opinion, it doesn't have to be. You can support Palestinians and you can support the Israeli people at the same time. You can do that. And people are trying to say nationally on TV, news, that you can't. And that is a huge, huge issue. So I definitely think partisan politics is definitely coming into play in both scenarios.
Yeah, once you start getting partisan politics into it, you're taking out the humanity and the actual what's going on. You're not really talking about that anymore. You're just talking about, as you say, like the sound bites, what's going to get people to support my side over the other, and it's to the detriment of the people that are actually living through the atrocities around the world. Yeah, it's awful.
I think to put a D or an R to people's lives is to discount them. I mean, you can't say that Ukrainians dying. I know there's been a lot of Republicans who aren't so pro-Ukraine. But then again, would it be would it be not to be a Republican to support funding to them? Or say to those dying over in the Middle East, in Israel and Palestine? I mean, there shouldn't be a D or an R next to that issue. I think there should be a solution, just a solution that both sides of Congress can get behind to help save these people. And I think that's a problem is we're sort of focusing so much on the national, right? Nation sort of relationships that we lose it. I don't know. I think putting a party to that is just getting rid of all humanity for it. And it's easy. I mean, it's easy for Americans to do that. Eastern Europe is very far away. The Middle East is quite far away. But would we be saying the same if this was, say, Spain and Portugal, right? A little closer. Would we be saying the same thing? I don't think so.
I don't think so either. That's a really good point. I also think we have to always keep in mind that these are two very drastically different situations. The United States is like sometimes too much like Bob the Builder in thinking that we can fix everything. What I believe that we can advocate for is an end to the violence and the slaughtering of innocents, and making sure that there is stability in the region. But for us to broker a generational deal with taking Hamas out of the equation, hypothetically, right now, between Palestinian leadership and Israeli leadership, we can bring them to the table, but that has to come from them. There has to be a want to see both sides and to try to yearn for better situations for generations going forward. Russia, we're quite plainly dealing with a dictator and a bully, someone who hates the West. I can like there are like one or two points that Putin makes that I'm like, well, if I'm being in someone else's shoes, like I would dislike if someone did that too. But the 98% of what he spouts is dictatorial. And why everyone in this nation needs to get behind more funding to Ukraine is because if Putin is successful, he's not done there. The Baltics are next. Then it's Kazakhstan. He will create an empire. He has said it. He wants to create the Russian Empire again. And we should take him at his word. And if we are a country that really wants to stand up for democratic ideals and at least advocate for a better life for people who are living under dictatorial regimes, this is a fight we need to stay in. I understand why Biden doesn't want to put troops on the ground. I completely get that. But NATO as an alliance, we need to make sure that Ukraine is funded.
How you mentioned that the war in Russia and Ukraine could lead to national implications. I'm curious if you think, let's say Hamas overtook Palestine and Israel. Do you think if, say, Hamas grew to a large power, there would be national implications to that as well? And do you think it would be similar to the ones that maybe Russia would have?
If Hamas started gaining ground, that is the worst news for President Biden. Because for Hamas to gain ground, that means one, more terrorist attacks, more bloodshed, and more death of innocents. And that is literally, not to politicize that hypothetical tragic situation, but that would be possibly the worst thing to happen under a President Biden watch. With Russia, I actually think one mistake that this administration has made, I don't think they've played in enough to standing up to Putin. This is a president that rode a train in the middle of the night in peak time of the war between Russia and Ukraine and went to Kiev and stood with President Zelensky, rode through a war zone. Talk about that. Talk about it. That's what we do to stand with our allies. We will weather war zones to make sure that people can have freedom that live in dictatorial regimes like Putin is trying for Russia. And this is where we come back to messaging. Biden has done things that I think would get people feeling in here like, yes, let's go. We need to stand by our commander in chief, but we don't message it well. And it just comes out as we let the Republicans distort that the money that is going to Ukraine is just without restriction. Like we're just throwing it away. Let's gotta fight back on the messaging. So yeah, that I hope that answered your question. But both conflicts, I think he hasn't delved into the Russia-Ukraine one actually enough. Like this is a way to rally the country. Israel, Hamas, that is very touchy. And I pray that something doesn't happen that you were alluding to, like late October, because that could switch an election. It really could.
So you've kind of mentioned that maybe Biden hasn't publicized enough his positions on Putin. I
Mhm.
do think that's a missed opportunity, and I want to see if you
Yep.
agree, as Trump has been probably the most, I'd say, open to wanting to try to be more allied with Putin and Russia. And do you think maybe if the Democrats had, because I believe personally most Americans don't want an allyship with Russia. I believe that. Maybe I'm wrong. And I think maybe if the Democrats set it up that way, as Trump and that side being a bit more pro Russia, and say the Democrats being a bit more pro America and democracy, do you think maybe that would be a good idea to sort of get people out to vote?
I do, but Biden can't be the only one selling it. We have people in the Democratic Party that reach different demographics that can relate that message in a way that will resonate with different geographic demographics as well. Let me give an example. I think the best person in the Democratic Party to go on Fox News and make them look like fools is Pete Buttigieg. I really do. I mean, that man he is a talented wordsmith. Where has he been? Where's your Stacey Abramses, your Beto O'Rourke's, your Julian Castro's, uh, people who, in my opinion, actually get people like passionate, like excited, and that can like give that message. Where are they? Where are they? And it can't just be President Biden and Vice President Harris. That's not going to cut it. It's time to start pulling out the people that can narrow that enthusiasm gap. Now, maybe they're trying to do that closer to general election day. So wait to see. But if you don't use your surrogates, it's a wrap. Because Donald Trump does. He very much does. He uses not just his kids, but you have your Marjorie Taylor Greens, your Matt Gaetz, your Lauren Boebert, you're traveling the country stumping for this man. And that needs to happen on our side too.
To kind of tie it into our next topic of immigration, you have seen people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and other Republicans sort of be bashing Biden over one huge policy, which is his immigration policy. And I wonder if you think that maybe sort of Biden's lack of response to the immigration issue may be one of the factors that if Republicans truly use that, they could win this election. Do you think that would be a very wise decision to use sort of Biden's immigration response as a way to get people mobilized to vote Republican?
Well, I actually think he's the past few months he had a great response. Legislation was on the verge of being passed for more border funding slash security. And all I'll say is that all you need to see with your Marjorie Taylor Greens, your Matt Gaetzes, and everyone that hammers Biden on immigration is that when immigration and border security legislation came to the floor, Republicans were told no by Donald Trump because Biden would have had a win legislatively and Trump wouldn't have been able to use the issue of how they've been using it the whole time as a political game. All of Congress and the country would have succeeded by having that legislation be passed bipartisanly. Mitch McConnell stood down because Trump said no. Mike Johnson stood down because Trump said no. And that when Republicans start talking about immigration now, I won't even listen to someone, especially an elected. When you had the opportunity to pass bipartisan effective border security legislation, and because your mafia don Trump said no, it shows who you're beholden to, and it's not the people.
So, just to reiterate this point, 'cause I think it's a very good point. What you're saying is that the Republicans voted against policy they've been trying to get passed for years just so they can win an election. Is that what you're saying?
That is 2000% unabashed on the record, like what I am saying. And the last time I have seen Joe Biden, Mitch McConnell, and House leadership agree on something, all three of that whole triumvirate was like never. And they had the legislation that they agreed upon. But because the Republicans reneged on it, because Daddy told them no, that shows who you represent or who you're beholden to and who you don't represent, and that's your constituents.
And I think also bringing it back to the whole point about messaging, and the Biden administration has been awful at trying to talk about, their actual messaging on immigration, because when you actually look into the numbers, he's so similar to the Trump administration and the amount of deportations and things that, Republicans would be very in support of. They've been doing that all along since Title 42 ended, May last year. The average deportations were like 500,000 since then, whereas Trump averaged 500,000 a year. So Biden has been really strong on the border and immigration, but it's all coming back to the same points. We're talking about the same things on all of these issues.
Think about this. We are lacking in the polls with Latino American voters. That is wild. That we are running against a man. Forget all the racist stuff he said, but legislatively, openly says we want to build a wall between you and I. That is openly running on segregation, in my opinion.
He said he's going to deploy the National Guard to deport people. I mean, that's crazy.
We are lagging among Latino voters with Trump taking a good chunk away, but also with RFK Jr. I'm telling you, if this doesn't go our way, he's going to be a real spoiler, because he's very close poll wise to being able to qualify for the debate stage. And if that happens, I'm right back to anxiety. I'm right back to worrying, because I'm not saying he's this like all great politician, but if you actually follow him, because I actively try to follow all three candidates so I can try to speak on them from an educated point of view. He's really trying to use that Kennedy allure. And there's people falling for it. There really is. From the Super Bowl ad, if anyone saw that. So he worries me that he's going to hurt us in this election, or he could hurt Trump. I don't know. He's taking from both. So we just don't know.
Yeah, because all he has to do is shave off a couple thousand, couple tens of thousands of votes, and it's going to swing the election. I mean, that worries me. A strong third-party candidate is the worst nightmare for both parties, really.
I think the thing with RFK Jr., which makes him sort of a wild card in many aspects, is someone like Jill Stein, right? You know who she's taking votes from against Trump and Clinton. You knew she wasn't taking Trump votes. She's taking Clinton votes, and we all know that. But someone like RFK, what makes him unique is he doesn't really fit into a box. He can take votes away from Trump with more of his out there ideas, or he can take votes away from Biden with older Democrats who know the Kennedy name, or with maybe a bit more young Democrats. And you've actually seen in polls, some polls do have RFK above on young voters and above independents, which, by the way, independents is the fastest growing party amongst new voter registration. So I think his position is very unique. And the fact that he's not Trump or Biden, two of the most least favorable presidents we've had. So I do think it'll be a really interesting election to watch. And I think he is one of the most fascinating third party candidates.
Also, where I think our national party shot ourselves in the foot, RFK Jr. started running in the Democratic primary and went to the independent primary because, and this is in his own words, the DNC basically tried to disqualify him and completely attempt him from running. I think if it was RFK Jr. and Biden in a primary, I think President Biden would have won the primary. He could have, because the DNC didn't roadblock RFK Jr. to run a campaign in the party. When he lost in the primary, we could have used that as a unification strategy. But now look at the position we're in. We're sitting here talking about being worried if he's going to shave off enough votes because he's running as an independent.
And I think that's a huge issue with the Democratic Party and to an extent the Republican Party. You saw many people discrediting the other candidates other than Trump. Many members of the party were not supportive. I mean, in Nikki Haley's own state of South Carolina, the governor endorsed Trump. I think you have an issue where Trump is seen as an incumbent and that's how the Republican Party sees him. And same with the Democratic Party. Every single other candidate, RFK Jr. to I think the worst extent, has been roadblocked by the DNC, as well as Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips. I mean, if you had a more open primary and then Biden still won, I think that would bring a unifying strength rather than, oh, Biden was just handed it. If you show him legitimately winning, that would bring people behind him.
Okay, let me put it this way. I believe that sunshine is the best disinfectant. And when you shine a light and you actively openly talk about issues, I think that makes people respect a party more. So when people see like people being pushed out of being able to be on a primary debate stage even to debate our incumbent president, it's a turnoff. It's just a huge turnoff.
Yeah, it really is. Or when you have a debate stage and the supported, basically by all accounts, incumbent doesn't come. The fact that there was no punishment, no pushback on the Republican Party is was insane. Although, in a way, I guess Cole, since is a representative of the Democratic Party, that probably made you happy.
Yes. Yeah, actually, you're right. No impact. I find it astounding that, as you said, no accountability for him not showing up. It's fascinating. And this man can draw out rural voters like it's no one's business. It's impressive. It really is like the how many votes he can pull out of the rural areas in this country to match, in many cases, your city populous areas. This is going to be a fight. It really is. This is going to be a fascinating election. And we should all accept that no one cares about him being a convicted criminal. I mean, like, when he's still running neck and neck after all of this, it's like we're going up against 2016 Trump yet again. And we haven't even gotten to his handling on COVID. I mean, it's just wild.
One thing I think that, and maybe this is a missed opportunity for the Democrats, is many policies that Democrats push can help rural voters. Pennsylvania's Supreme Court found school funding unconstitutional. There were two groups that supported this or that kind of campaigned for this: the Pennsylvania chapter of the NAACP and the Pennsylvania Association for Rural Schools. I mean, if you really show voters that a certain party pushes their values and their interests more, I think, as we mentioned before, it's a fail in the Democratic Party to bring up the fact that rural voters, we care about you. I grew up in a rural county, and people felt the Democratic Party abandoned them. That's why they went to Trump. If you stop these voters from feeling abandoned, they'll vote for you. I mean, if you just talk to them and listen to them, they'll vote for you.
Yes, it is fascinating to me that we don't see this as a party. You are spot on, absolutely right. I mean, this is just factual. I mean, when Biden does come and campaign in Pennsylvania, majority of the time it is always in Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. And that you can't win this state with just Philly and Pittsburgh. You just can't. And maybe there was one time you could, but not since I've been involved. Can you, Sam? You're right. And then you talk about issues that we could run on. I want to add one more. If we ran as a core campaign point on rural broadband, I promise you, we will win. I have friends and family that live up in Meadville, up towards Erie. I mean, I'm taking out my phone. I can't even get on Google. I mean, shoot, like and that's important because it's not just for luxury; it's for living. It's for providing for your family. Like, it goes much deeper than just making sure people have internet, making sure they have a new way of life to provide for their families and such in many different avenues. Governor Shapiro talks about it. I give credit where credit's due. Senator Fetterman talks about it. I never hear national Dems when they come to PA or rural areas in our current leadership talk about issues such as that. So, huge missed opportunity.
I haven't lived in a rural county in a while, and yeah, I forgot how bad the internet was. It was awful. You can barely stream. And yeah, why does Biden visit Philly and Pittsburgh? You've won Philly.
preaching to the choir. It doesn't make any sense. Like, you're talking to the people that are already converted to your side. You're not gonna lose those districts.
That's one thing I'll give Trump is he's come to Harrisburg many times. I mean, he was there at the farm show complex, which again, an event that appeals to more rural voters. And he's been here multiple times. I mean, Harrisburg's a very purple district. You have the more urban section, or sorry, Harrisburg area, not city. The city's very blue, consistently blue. But you get out to the more rural parts of central PA, and you're gonna see a lot of people who vote Trump, not because they're for his maybe, I guess can't say free market, but more Republican corporate ideas.
Mhm.
That's not why they're voting for him. They're voting for him because he comes there, he hears them, and he sees them.
Yeah.
And I think it's a mistake of the Biden campaign to not come to Harrisburg, to not go to Lancaster, to not go up to Selinsgrove, to not go to Erie.
It blows my mind. And can anyone tell me 2016, what was Trump's last campaign stop of the whole campaign election?
Was it Hershey?
Hershey, Pennsylvania. That is correct. The last campaign stop, Hershey, Pennsylvania. Sam, I'm in leadership in the party and I don't have an answer for you. I really don't. It's one that I keep asking myself. And I have tremendous respect for President Biden, and I am behind him. But to have a healthy democratic republic that we have, it's healthy to hold leadership accountable. It's not a bad thing. And people are pushing that it is. But when we push our leaders, that's when we win, in my opinion. So that's something that I'm asking in the party, to be quite candid with both of you, at all levels, at state level, when we get together for our state committee meetings, to our state leadership. Why isn't Biden, I phrase it coming to my county, because I'm also on state committee, elected to represent Dauphin County at the state party. But I'm always asking, why isn't he coming to our county? Well, where is he in Dauphin? We are actually, I wouldn't say a purple county anymore. Dauphin is a blue county. Just by post 2015, Dauphin has gone blue in every national election. Post 2015, in every major statewide election for governor or U.S. Senate, Dauphin has gone blue. So, and also now at a county level, we have flipped our commissioner board to Democrat, as well as Bridget Whitley being the first Democrat clerk of courts in Dauphin County. Susquehanna Township has become more blue. Swatara Township, we've had battles there. Hershey had a blue sweep of our school board election this past year. All the Democrats won. I don't know what other evidence national Dems need to see that it is important for us to rally here to make sure the rest of the region is competitive as well. Some hard truths in this conversation.
Yeah,
This has been a great conversation, guys.
it has. And I would love to continue it, but I think for the sake of time, I think that's a great point to end on.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's the one we want people to hear. So we can end on that.
There we go. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate you having me on. And I'm happy to come on at any time, especially when we get closer to election day and such, to come on and discuss where we're at. And if I'd be honored. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Next Gen PA is a podcast from the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg. For more information on the World Affairs Council of Harrisburg, visit our website at wacharrisburg.org.